The gender inequality that exists in music making has at this point been well documented by scholars. Female, transgender, and non-binary artists have been marginalized by gender expectations, underrepresented in the media, and under-supported by major record labels. This video essay briefly explores sound and music innovator stories, focusing on those who broke gender and race barriers, led music categories, and created genre-bending music works. When we talk about rock and roll roots, we mention artists such as Jerry Lee Lewis, Chuck Berry, or Elvis Presley as those who have developed the genre. However, female artists have already explored guitars and swinging rhythms since the start of the recording industry. Gospel singer and guitar virtuoso Sister Rosetta Tharpe has left a lasting legacy as the godmother of rock and roll. Before rock and roll became a genre, Sister Rosetta inspired a generation of musicians, including Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and Johnny Cash. Janis Smartin is known as the female Elvis for her dance moves on stage. She was a pioneer rockabilly star and one of the country's music's early female innovators. Jazz and blues are no exception, commonly being thought of and historicized as a man's world, sometimes decorated by girl singers. In 1922, Mamie Smith became the first African-American vocalist to make a vocal blues recording, and her biggest hit sold 1 million copies. Her success opened the door for other black female blues singers to be sought after by record labels. Bessie Smith was the most popular and highest paid singer of her day, releasing 160 recordings and selling millions of records. The historical shared and tangled root of rock, jazz, folk, and R&B somehow divide most critics, leading to the current overuse of sentences like genre-defying or female composer. The folk revival may have been at the forefront of social change, but a female-identified artist who isn't the lead singer of a band is still a rarity that's worth celebrating. Women have always been involved in the creation and evolution of music categories. Carole King was one of the 3 great independent songwriters of the 60s and possibly the most successful songwriter ever, penning Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow and Natural Woman amongst over 2 hits. Joni Mitchell's influential albums changed singer-songwriters' language with her melding of pop and jazz, innovative lyrics, and guitar playing. Musical innovator Alice Coltrane is an influential spiritualist who developed her sound on piano, organ, and harp with visionary work that broke to jazz rules. Sylvia Robinson is one of the most significant producers and label owners of all time. Missy Elliott partnered with Timbaland and helped establish an era-defining revolutionary sound, joining R&B and electronic music. Punk rock and feminism have both opened up cultural spaces, and artists use this moment to transgress gender and race domination. Yoko Ono catapulted straight out of the turbulent counterculture of the 1960s into the modern culture with her experimental vocalist works. Patti Smith's debut album Horses heavily contributed to an explosion in DIY music making that influenced punk, grunge, riot girl, alternative rock, and indie. In Britain, punk culture introduced the DIY, do-it-yourself ethic to a generation of young people that created provocative art, music, and culture. Empowered by DIY punk ethics, women took up punk music making across Britain in bands like Susie and the Banshees, Delta 5, the Modettes, the Au Pairs, and the Slits. The 1990s Riot Girl, responding to the cultural and political marginalization of young female-identified people with productions that challenged and resisted the gender power relations of music subcultures. A few years later, girl power became part of the mainstream in a strikingly revised commercial form led by the Spice Girls, who in 1997 became international superstars. Female figures have always been involved in the development of electronic machinery linked to musical creation. Besides being mathematicians, physicists, or engineers, many were also composers of music or creators of sounds. It is common to talk about the great pioneers of electronics and recognize names like Leon Theremin, Pierre Schaeffer, or Brian Eno. However, few will remember that Leon Theremin got famous thanks to his tour with Clara Rockmore. Similarly, few know that just before Bob Moog created his first synthesizer in 1963, Daphne Oram had already made her Oramix machine in 1957. Women dominated 2020 nominations, but industry gender equality is still a world away. One fundamental truth should be underpinned as another award season approaches. Recognition and gender equality are not possible without opportunity. To summarize, audiences, performers, and music industry actors such as record labels and festivals must still diversify and push gender equality until systemic change really begins.